Hello again. We're continuing our discussion on Michael Frost's book Surprise the World and the Bells habits. BELLS. Bless, eat, listen, learn, and scent. And so now we're turning to the fourth habit. I will spend at least one period a week learning Christ. What a strange phrase, learning Christ. What does that mean? Well, listen to these words from St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, chapter 4, beginning at verse 17. Now, this I affirm and insist on in the Lord, you must no longer live as the Gentiles live, in the futility of their minds. They are darkened in their understanding, alienated from the life of God because of their ignorance and hardness of heart. They have lost all sensitivity and have abandoned themselves to licentiousness, greedy to practice every kind of impurity. That is not the way you learned Christ. For surely you have heard about him and were taught in him, as truth is in Jesus. You were taught to put away your former way of life, your old self, corrupt and deluded by its lusts, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to clothe yourselves with the new self, created according to the likeness of God, in true righteousness and holiness. So the center of that passage is verse 20. That is not the way you learned Christ. What does it mean in this paragraph to learn Christ? I would define it as the habit of focusing our mind and heart on the life and words of Jesus with the goal of transformation into his image. Let me say that again. I would define it as the habit of focusing our mind and heart on the life and words of Jesus with the goal of transformation into his image. Now, there are two reasons why that's a good thing for us to do. First of all, there's the benefit for ourselves, the devotional value of growing closer to the person of Jesus as we are learning his teaching, as we are meditating on his way of life and seeking to conform ourselves to his will. This is really the heart of what discipleship is all about. We're being transformed into the image of Jesus, becoming like him. So that has value for us in our walk with him as disciples. But also, if we are going to share him with other people, as St. Peter says, the reason for the hope that is in you, we need to know him. So we need to know what Jesus would say and what Jesus would do in any given circumstance. We can't know that without regular focus on Jesus as his story is presented to us in the Gospels. C.S. Lewis has a lovely quote in Mere Christianity. Michael Frost actually quotes it on page 72 of his book. Lewis says, "In the same way, the church exists for nothing else but to draw people into Christ, to make them little Christs. If they're not doing that, all the cathedrals, clergy, missions, sermons, even the Bible itself, are simply a waste of time. God became man for no other purpose. It is even doubtful, whether the whole universe was created for any other purpose. It says in the Bible that the whole universe was made for Christ, and that everything is to be gathered together in him." And then Frost goes on to unpack what Lewis says here. He says some readers will be disturbed by Lewis's reference to us becoming little Christs, but he isn't proposing anything blasphemous. Rather, he is promoting a preoccupation with the example and teaching of Jesus for the purposes of emulation by his followers. Of course, we can't emulate Christ in his salvific death and resurrection, his miracles, and his judgment on the unrighteous. But we can embrace a study and examination of the person and work of Jesus, helping us to determine the various elements of his character and activity, helping us to determine how the various elements of his character and activity can be emulated by us as sinful human beings. For example, we can't die for others, as Jesus did, but we can offer ourselves sacrificially in service to others. Learning Christ helps us to understand Jesus better and provides the tools for appropriating his example into our lives. So, again, as we said in the last session, many of us already have regular prayer and Bible reading habits, and Frost is not suggesting that we stop them. Rather, he's suggesting that we supplement them with a weekly period in which we focus on Jesus in the Gospels. And I think there are 3 ways that we can do this. The first is, simply to read the Gospels. You can read the Gospels in one sitting, actually. It takes between 90 minutes and 2 hours to read the Gospel of Mark all the way through, depending on how fast a reader you are. Luke and Matthew and John will take a little longer because they are longer. But to read the Gospels all the way through in big chunks helps you connect to their broad themes and the main storyline. You can also read them in smaller sections and use study helps and little commentaries to help you understand the cultural background and explore the meaning of the words or actions of Jesus. This is the slow method, writing down questions and thoughts as you go through. We are never going to come to the end of our need to do that, focusing on the story of Jesus as it's told us in the Gospels. And then a second thing is that we can do other kinds of reading about Jesus. There are many excellent books which can help us to focus on the character of Jesus. Some of the ones which I am particularly fond of. Philip Yancey wrote a lovely book in the 1990s called The Jesus I Never Knew, talking about his own experience of getting to know the person of Jesus from the Gospels after years of really concentrating on the New Testament epistles and what he learned about the human person of Jesus. I would really recommend that book, The Jesus I Never Knew. There are several books by N.T. Wright that focus on the person of Jesus. Kenneth Bailey has written a book called Jesus Through Middle Eastern Eyes, exploring the character of Jesus as he would have appeared to a person who lived in his time and place. Father James Martin has an excellent little book just called Jesus, and so on. So there are all kinds of really, really helpful books, and your parish priest can probably recommend their favourite ones as well to help you to explore the person of Jesus. So reading the Gospels, reading other books about Jesus. And of course, there's what we might call further viewing. There are many, many excellent movies about Jesus. My personal favourite is the miniseries Jesus of Nazareth, which came out in the 1970s. It's a 6-hour miniseries. But of course, movies are always interpretations of the story of Jesus. But nonetheless, many of them are helpful in helping us to encounter the flesh and blood Jesus. One miniseries that's going on right now is the miniseries The Chosen. I haven't watched it myself, but some of my friends who have tell me that it's really, really excellent. And they can also be very helpful evangelistically. I can remember when Jesus of Nazareth first came out, my aunt had a friend who she was hanging about with a little bit, and neither of them were particularly churchgoers. But I remember watching on my aunt's television the conversation between Jesus and Nicodemus about being born again. And listening to the words of Jesus there, my aunt's friend said, "I understand it now. I've never understood it before." That was the power of a visual presentation of the story. Michael Frost ends his chapter on learning Christ with this really lovely illustration. He says, one of the beautiful things that happens to people who marinate their minds in the Gospels is that they start to talk about Jesus like he's their hero, their friend, their king. Some years ago, I was speaking at a conference for a parachurch ministry called Christian Surfers in Australia. Christian Surfers is an awesome ministry that aims to share Jesus with young surfers. They have chapters based in beachside towns and suburbs all around the world. This conference was for their staff workers from around Australia. During one of my sessions, I asked the attendees, all hardcore surfing enthusiasts, to name their favourite surfer of all time. Now, when you ask a room full of keen surfers to name their surfing hero, the room erupts. I heard a number of different names being called out, but the name I heard most often was that of Florida surfer Kelly Slater. I wasn't surprised. Slater has been crowned the world surfing champion a record 11 times, including 5 consecutive times from 1994 to 1998. He is both the youngest at age 20 and the oldest at age 39 to win the title. Okay, I called out to the excitable audience. Let's choose Kelly Slater as an example. So what do you know about Kelly Slater? This time the room didn't just erupt, it combusted. When I asked a bunch of surfers to tell me what they knew about undoubtedly the most successful surfer in all of history, they went nuts. They were yelling and screaming facts about Slater's life, where he grew up, Cocoa Beach, what boards he uses, Channel Island surfboards, which years he won the title, too many to list here, what movies and television shows he's appeared in, too many to list here, which models and movie stars he's dated, again, too many to list here, and on and on. It was pandemonium, and it took a while to quiet them all down again. Later in the session, I was talking about our need to marinate our minds in the Gospels so we can share Jesus as the reason for the hope we have. So I asked them, tell me, what do you all know about Jesus? The response this time was very different. It wasn't as if these folks didn't know anything about Jesus. They're highly committed evangelists. In fact, they lead many young surfers to Christ every year. But the response was much more muted. Slowly, quietly, people offered things they knew about Jesus. He's the Lord. He died for our sins. He rose from the dead. But these were presented as doctrinal beliefs, statements of faith. I asked them why they didn't speak about Jesus in the same way that they had just been telling me about Kelly Slater. Again, crickets. It seems to me that this is our challenge today. As I mentioned earlier, I don't think every Christian is an evangelist, but I do think every Christian should be evangelistic. When we live questionable lives, people should see our strange behavior and ask us about our motivations. And when they do, we should be able to speak about Jesus the way surfers speak about Kelly Slater, with energy and enthusiasm, with reverence and awe, with delight and wonder. So that's why we need to focus on learning Christ. So we've talked about blessing people, we've talked about eating with people, we've talked about listening to the Holy Spirit, we've talked about learning Christ. In our next video, we'll talk about being sent in mission.